In this Best of 2025 episode, you're getting a masterclass in how to optimize your health, energy, and longevity as a woman. This is a powerful compilation of the most impactful conversation we've shared this year, the ones that stop people in their tracks, the ones that changed how women train, recover, fuel, think, and age. You're going to hear about why your metabolism doesn't actually slow with age, how creatine can change your energy, brain, and body composition, how spermidine supports deep cellular renewal, and make sure you listen to the end as you'll hear about the not just free, but enjoyable daily practice that may just be one of the most underrated tools for longevity, hormones, and mental health. These are the conversations that shaped my thinking this year, the ones my community couldn't stop talking about.
First, let me explain a little bit more of how this body's own fat burning process works. Obviously, if you're exercising, you'll eventually need the energy. And so the fat will get broken down and used as energy when you work out over time. Okay. That's why exercise is so helpful. But body fat is really tricky because there's not one kind of body fat, but there's two broad categories. There's white fat and there's brown fat. And the reason that they're two different colors has to do with what their function is. White fat is more padding. It's hormonal in nature. By the way, our body fat is an actual organ in our body. So when somebody says, I've got zero body fat, that's not a good thing. Like, women who actually get themselves down to zero body fat, they stop menstruating. They have, they get depressed, they get fatigued. That's not normal. We actually need a little bit of body fat. And by the way, if we had no fat whatsoever in our body, no padding, if you tripped on the steps and fell down, your organs would rupture. So we want body fat, just a little bit. Okay, to keep us going in a natural, and our metabolism actually is partly regulated by body fat. Okay, but that's white fat. If you have too much body fat, well, you've got subcutaneous fat under the arms, under the chin, the muffin top, as they say, the tire around the waist. That's extra body fat under the skin, subcutaneous. But there's an even more deadly form of body fat that when you get a little bit there, it's packed inside the tube of our body. So you might have a thin tube, a skinny tube, but even if you had a big tube or a thin tube, you can still stuff lots of this protective visceral fat in the tube of your body. Now, what does visceral fat do? It's a cushion. Okay, it acts like a cushion. So think about it. If you're going to try to overnight mail something to me in a tube, and it's delicate, you don't want it to break, what are you going to do, Angela? You're going to put some of those packing peanuts in there. But you ever see those packing peanuts? You could really stuff a lot of packing peanuts into a box and then tape it shut, right? Same thing as visceral fat. You can pack a lot of visceral fat even in a thin tube, all right? And that becomes really dangerous when you have too much of it. So the body's developed a natural way to control excess body fat, especially the visceral fat, because that's the dangerous stuff. It's like our protective mechanism of how to do it. So that kind of fat, subcutaneous and visceral fat, they call it white fat, because in fact, under the microscope, if you were to biopsy it and put it under the microscope, like a doctor like me would look at, it actually looks kind of light colored, kind of white-ish color. But the way that our body is designed to protect against that, to burn down extra harmful visceral fat, the white fat, is we have brown fat. Brown fat is not wiggly jiggly. It's not under the skin. In fact, and it's not all over the place. Brown fat is wafer thin, paper thin, and it's not around our waist. It's plastered on the sides of our neck. It's a little bit under the breastbone, a little bit between the shoulder blades, and it's scattered a little bit in your belly.
You wouldn't be able to see then. You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at someone how much brown fat they had.
No, not by looking at them. You would need to actually do a special kind of scan called a PET scan that picks up metabolism, because brown fat is the kind of fat that fires up your metabolism. And the way that it fires up your metabolism, you've heard a lot about out there, people talk about mitochondria, right? Mitochondria, the energy, the battery units of the body. You want energy, you want to have good mitochondria. When you're aging, your mitochondria go down, right? Like you've heard people talking about this. Well, brown fat is packed with mitochondria, meaning that when your body activates brown fat, that brown fat will fire up its batteries. Those batteries that are firing up are increasing your metabolism in order to be able to generate, maintain that metabolism, which will generate heat. It's got to burn down fuel. Where does the mitochondria from brown fat get that fuel? It sucks the fuel away from your visceral fat. So brown fat will actually burn down visceral fat. Brown fat is good fat, burns down bad fat, which is white fat, especially the visceral fat. Okay. And by the way, one little extra nugget, I know people who are listening or watching will probably want to know this. Why the heck is brown fat brown? Right?
Because
Um,
of all the
uh,
mitochondria.
because of the mitochondria. You got it. Because the mitochondria are very rich in stores of iron naturally. Now, iron, when it's oxidized, goes from silver to brown, just like a pile of nails that you put outside on your porch and leave it out there for a couple of days. Your brand new shiny nails are going to turn brown. So this is what happens why brown fat is brown. There's a lot of activity, a lot of oxidation that goes on in the mitochondria, which are loaded with iron. And so under the microscope, if you were to biopsy your brown fat, if I were to look at it under the microscope, it would be colored brown because of the mitochondria, because of the iron that's naturally present in mitochondria.
Can I ask you a very quick question then,
Yeah.
as an aside? Because it's a common thing, right, for women in perimenopause, it's something I've experienced recently, is if you become anemic then for a little bit, will that cause a reduction in your mitochondria?
You know, it's interesting. We're just beginning to understand how blood elements like red blood cells and like white blood cells and inflammation that can occur in hormonal milieu, how that actually might affect our brown fat. This is a pretty new science, you know. So my work is always very much on the bleeding edge, so to speak, of research. So what I'm sharing with you is some of these new discoveries. I don't know, and I'm an honest scientist. So Angela, you know you're talking to a real scientist when a scientist says, "Well, I don't know," because we don't know everything. The people who say they know everything might not be real scientists. So I don't know the answer to your question about anemia and brown fat, but it's an excellent question. And I think it's one of those things that are being studied now. What happens when you're anemic? What effect does that actually have on your mitochondria, and therefore what happens to your brown fat? That's a great research study, and also the effect of menopause itself and hormonal shifts on brown fat. I don't think are well understood either. Okay, but here's the good news. The good news is that many of the foods that we eat will activate brown fat. Check this out. A tomato for you, actually will turn on your brown fat. In fact, a study out of the University of Porto in Portugal looked at healthy women and had them just eat the normal things that they're eating. And these are younger women in their 20s. So these are college students, graduate students doing their normal thing. Okay. The only thing these researchers did, metabolism researchers, is they gave women one ripe tomato to eat an hour before lunch every day. That's it.
Why is it an hour? I heard you talk about this. Why is it an hour before lunch?
Because maybe during lunch you're not getting the absorption of all the micronutrients, right? Just to make sure you're getting the pure tomato. It could have been a half an hour, maybe it could have been 2 hours. There's no thing, but rather than rather than eat a tomato with a big sandwich where some of it might get washed away in your gut and not fully absorbed, they wanted to really give the body the full chance of actually digesting the tomato and all of its parts and all of its bits. Okay, they found that by giving just one tomato to these women a day, an hour before lunch for a month, it would actually shrink their waistline by an inch. And they would lose a pound, just 1 pound, but it's a pound of visceral fat because when they measured the visceral fat, and it would lower their inflammation. And you're like, I'm not that impressed with losing 1 pound. I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to lose 15 pounds. Hey, we're just talking about one tomato here. Okay.
And also a pound of visceral fat. I mean, that's big, right? This is a result.
You're not talking about a pound of muscle. You're talking about a pound of visceral fat, right? So it's really powerful. So what does the tomato do? Well, tomatoes actually have vitamin C, ascorbic acid. Tomatoes also have carotenoids like lycopene and beta cryptozanthin. Don't worry about the Latin words. Leave it to people like me who study this stuff. You can look them up on, ChatGPT or Google. But I can tell you that these are the known bioactives, lycopene, beta cryptozanthin, that will actually, when you eat them, they are absorbed in your bloodstream and they fire up your brown fat. So your brown fat will fire up, and as it fires up, the mitochondria light up. They ignite they light the fuse of the mitochondria. The mitochondria heat right up, and they're basically saying, we got to get energy. We're going to draw the energy from someplace. We need fuel. Just like when you go to your kitchen and if you have a gas range, right? You want to boil some water for some tea. You got to turn on the thing, the lighter. You got to go click, 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 whoosh. You get that fuel, the flame going. Where's that flame coming from to light that? It's got to get the gas from the line that's connected to the tank by the side of your house or the street. That's exactly how brown fat works. When you light up your brown fat, it's got to draw down fuel from someplace, and the first place it goes is to your visceral fat. So this is what a tomato does.
This is so exciting for so many people listening. This is amazing. And also for everyone who hates cold baths or cold plunges or cold showers, now you can just have a tomato.
I'm glad that you actually brought up the cold, because this is actually where brown fat was discovered, by the way. Brown fat, and I'll just give you, like I kind of geek out on this stuff because I love to always know what's the origin story of this brown fat. Like, I wasn't taught brown fat when I was in medical school at all. I had no idea. Okay, so brown fat was actually discovered in a furry creature living in the mountains of Europe in the 1800s by a naturalist who was studying hibernating animals. Okay. And so way back then, I mean, you go to the Natural History Museum, and you'll see all these beautiful drawings back in the olden days where people were pen and inking on parchment. And people were collecting animals and trying to understand the biology of animals. And one of the questions was, okay, you get a animal that eats a ton of food, and then they crawl into their little den, and then it snows or it gets bitterly cold in the mountains. How does it make it? How does it survive? How does it survive the cold? The cold would kill a spider or a butterfly, and even a human if you're out there in the cold exposed. How come the animal doesn't die? And by the way, it's not eating. So how does it even survive, right? It's a fundamental question of hibernation. So they got an animal and they dissected it. Now, I know that's not politically correct to talk about these days, but this is what we used to do to discover things. Sometimes you need to cut them open. And what they found was that in these hibernating animals, between their shoulder blades, there was this little round mound of stuff that was brown. And they called it a hibernoma. Oma referring like a tumor, like a mass. They had no idea what it was, and they had no idea why it was brown. Fast forward, and they found this not only in the little muskratty thing in the mountains. They found it in bats. They found it in other animals that started to hibernate. Okay, and they were like, "Oh, this is a hibernoma. Let's call it a hibernoma." Well, fast forward to the 1930s in Los Angeles in the United States, a researcher took a look at this brown mass lump that was in hibernating animals. And guess what? By the 1930s, we had some pretty sophisticated microscopes compared to the 1800s. Looked at it and said, oh my gosh, that is actually fat. By looking even deeper, you can see the elements of the fat, and it's packed with mitochondria. So that was the discovery of brown fat. And we thought, by the way, it was only found in hibernating animals, because humans, we have fireplaces, we have thermostats, we got heating units. We don't need that anymore, right? We don't have anything between our shoulder blades. Maybe a baby would have it, but did we evolve away from having brown fat? That's what was the thinking for the time. And I'm sharing this with you, Angela, because this is actually how science advances and medicine advances. We come to some ideas, we get stuck on this idea for a long time until the next discovery tells us, maybe we weren't quite right there. So, and we need to explore something else. Okay, so what's this next thing we explored? Well, we developed in the 1980s and the 90s something called a PET scan. PET scans you might hear about for cancer patients. Somebody has cancer, you do a CT scan, an MRI scan, and maybe a PET scan. A PET scan was designed by radiologists specifically to look for metabolism. All right. And so here's how human brown fat was discovered. In Boston, there was a woman who actually had by x-ray, a lump in her chest that looked like a tumor. They scanned her, CT and MRI and then PET scan, and this thing lit up like a Christmas tree. Whoa, this thing is very metabolically active. So this is when you hear about tumors being very metabolically active and sugar feeding cancers and stuff like that. This is the kind of thing that people are talking about, and they're like, I wonder what that is. So the surgeons actually went to remove it, because that's what you do when there's a tumor that you can get to. They removed it, and the pathologist looked at it under the microscope. Guess what? It was not a cancer. It was actually a lump of brown fat that was lighting up. And
And she would
so,
have had such a good metabolism before they removed
well,
it.
well, listen, this is a big discovery in the 1990s, right? This is like the
Yeah.
first discovery in adults that adults have brown fat. 1990s, okay, it seems like it's a while ago, 30 years ago, but I want to just tell you, this is how we're still discovering new things in the human body, all right? Even recently, is what I'm telling you. Okay, so now the researchers are like, they're scratching their heads saying, we've never seen this before in an adult. Let's go back and look at other PET scans to see if we found anything similar. And we just missed it, right? So the radiologist went and dug back at all the records, and they said, some people had these like brown fatty things. A lot of people didn't. And then you know what they did? They wanted to find out, when did people get these PET scans? Turns out the ones that had the brown fat lighting up all got their scans in the winter. Cold weather would actually light up the brown fat. Oh, doesn't that make sense for the hibernating animal? In exposed to cold, their brown fat would light up, fire up, keep the animal warm so it's not going to die in the cold. And it's feeding, the battery is being, the energy is being fueled by burning down the extra body fat. And remember, hibernating animals are eating like crazy. They're overeating. They're stuffing calories into their body. They're round mounds. Okay. And that's how they survive over the winter without food, is that they're burning and digesting all this extra fuel, and they're staying warm at the same time. It turns out humans also have this, which is why this cold plunge that I used to be kind of skeptical about actually works.
Are you saying then that basically we don't have as much brown fat in the summer months, right? But we kind of almost gain weight in preparation. Then we have, if we expose ourselves enough to cold and don't wrap up and sit by the fire, we have
Yeah.
sufficient brown fat that then keeps us warm, and actually we stay very metabolically healthy year
What
round.
it is that we our brown fat becomes less active when it's warm.
Right. Oh, so
Unless you
it's
feed,
still
it's still
there.
there, yeah. Unless you feed it. If you feed it tomatoes, if you want to feed it broccoli, if you want to feed it extra virgin olive oil, those polyphenols, coffee or tea will also light up your brown fat. Those are some of the things that we naturally like to consume every day on an everyday basis. I have a cup of coffee every morning, and I know that lights up my brown fat, so it actually makes me metabolically healthier as well. As long as you don't put cream or dairy into it, as long as you don't add sugar to it, and especially if you don't add a squirt of syrup that's actually flavored syrup that's got artificial sweeteners and artificial flavorings into it. And this is why what we're learning is that elementally, Mother Nature, when you have food in its sort of elemental form, and you can combine those elemental forms. That's how traditional Mediterranean diet works. That's how traditional Asian diet works as well. That's how they eat in the blue zones. They eat very elementally. That actually allows our body to take advantage of this hardwiring that we're talking about.
What about they're looking at protein? Obviously, we talked earlier. It's the more you're doing, right, the more requirements you have for that and for those amino acids as well. Talking about this, because we were talking there a little bit around digestion as well. So for a busy woman who is training, like myself and many of the women that are listening to this podcast, sometimes if you've got a lot going on, it's school term time, it's not summer holidays, it's difficult to get that overnight kind of 12 hours where you're not eating, unless you're willing to then train fasted and leave a period afterwards. That's the way that I would get that in, which is okay. If you're listening on audio show, Stacey's shaking her head at me. And so actually before this podcast, Stacey, I did go and have a protein shake and
Good
some
work.
blueberries and different things. Yeah, so maybe that's why I'm switched on. No, I'm joking.
Good.
So when I get back, it's difficult, right? Because you're trying to balance, as a busy mum who's working, you're trying to balance a lot of things. And you know that you also, my digestion feels better when I let it rest. Some people will say, and people who talk about muscle and longevity, that actually total protein is what the science shows, and that we don't need to worry so much about protein timing. I've heard you talk about how that's more on men. How much do we need to worry about the timing of protein, and how can we balance this against having periods where we're not eating?
There's a few things I want to explain here. So when we talk about exercise is a fasted state. We see that exercise does all of the things in a more structured and a stronger adaptation than fasting. So we're talking about extension of our telomere length. We're talking about getting rid of the zombie cells. We're talking about autophagy. All of that happens with exercise. So if we're looking at an overnight fast of 12 hours, that's if you don't exercise, right? So if we're looking at trying to get the benefits of an overnight fast without exercise, yeah, you need 12 to 13 hours to really help get the body and the system moving in the direction that we want for a longer health span. But when you exercise, you are also creating a better environment for a better health span, a longer health span. So for you, I want to bring this point up. If you're talking about, trying to extend and get into fasted training, I was on another conversation with another woman down in Oz, and she wanted to really work to increase her strength. So she did a dedicated 1-year total strength program. And part of it, she also wanted to increase her total lean mass because she had DEXAs, and she's like, I really need to build my lean mass. She spent an entire year following a particular program, and she got really strong. She got into triple digits for a deadlift. She was 1.5 times her body weight in a full squat. She went to get her DEXA. There was only 100-gram increase in her lean mass. And I was like, that's weird. But then I found out why. Because she was doing fasted training, and she was delaying her food intake until after the kids had gone to school. So that means that she was doing all of her training, and she could stimulate the central nervous system, sure. And you can get neural pathways to increase the muscle contractile strength, but you're not giving the body the amino acids it needs to grow. When you start doing a heavy strength program, you need to eat to build that tissue. So when we're looking at protein and protein timing, it's really important for women to understand that if you're doing fasted training, you're really compromising your body's ability to adapt. And when we look at our protein and our muscle protein synthesis and the mTOR that happens with protein intake, it's up to 2 hours after exercise that we see a boost for women, and then it starts to die off. So it does matter when we're eating our protein. 1, to build muscle. 2, to shut down that breakdown state that happens with things like low energy availability. That's a very high precedence in recreational female athletes. And then when we're thinking about protein throughout the day, why not take every eating opportunity to have some protein and fiber? So we can hit our macros that we need, we can hit our fiber, and then we still have a longer time of no eating because we've hit all of that in the hours that we have when we're awake, when our body needs it. That's my lecture to you.
My lecture. I think I had one on the last one. No, I actually, but here I have changed because I did eat.
I know.
But
good.
What's really interesting there, because I actually want to spell this out for people, because really, really interesting what you said. So she did a year. She improved her strength. She got really strong, right? And I can validate this. I am also very strong. I can jump up, pull myself up, do anything pretty much that I want. However, what she didn't get was the lean mass. This is actually the muscle mass, which is the size. And this seems important to me because actually it's muscle mass that helps regulate things like insulin sensitivity, right? Which we know women have problems with. So she's strong. She's going to have good bone density. She can lift. She's got all those benefits. But in terms of the actual body composition and the metabolic benefits, she sounds like she's missing out.
Missing the mark.
Missed
a whole year opportunity of building that lovely muscle that helps pretty much as a glucose sink.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and how many women say, I put a CGM and I'm really worried I'm getting these spikes and I'm really struggling, and they're not optimizing for this. Has she done an after, like where she's pre-fueled? Because here's the thing, I've got really good. Not yet. Because I'm interested in this. I'm going to go get another DEXA done because I have got good, thank you to your work, at pre-fueling post-exercise, but I still can't get my head around eating before. So I'm having caffeine and amino acids when I'm exercising. That's what I'm doing. but I can't actually stick food in my mouth because I don't train as well. I'm going to be honest. I just don't train as well. I'm so conditioned into what I'm doing. I feel sluggish.
Yeah, because it's a learned response. So when you start putting some food in, then your body starts wanting that food when you wake up. Because through our culture, our diet culture, women have trained themselves not to be hungry in the morning and to feel like they're overly full if they have something first thing in the morning. We look at all the metabolic parameters of our appetite hormones and the way our brain is telling us that we need to eat, that it's a disconnect. The body is telling us from our appetite hormones and our cortisol and all of our perturbations of our hormones that we need food first thing in the morning. But in our head, we have had this self-talk through the diet industry that you don't need to eat. So many women have trained themselves and go, oh, I'm not hungry until 10 o'clock. It's like if you give your body food within a half an hour of waking up, it's going to learn that that's normal. And all your appetite hormones and everything is going to be regulated and you're going to feel hungry. So for you, it's like, why not have protein coffee? Have some almond milk with protein and add a shot of espresso. And if you don't like coffee, then you can think about a latte with protein.
Why would that be better than like essential amino acids? Because aren't they just very bioavailable? Why would protein coffee be better?
Because you're getting calories with the protein coffee.
Oh, okay.
And you're getting whole
calories.
protein.
Okay.
Because when you're looking at the protein coffee with something like almond milk in it, you're getting a little bit of carb, you're getting some more calories from that. It's not a robust amount. It might be 100 to 120, depending on how much protein you're putting in there, and almond milk. But if you're looking at just caffeine and amino acids, that's nothing. And the essential amino acids are not used the same as a whole protein. They circulate, but they don't do the same kind of trigger as a whole protein.
Okay, this is interesting then. So just so people understand, because this is not going to be just me, this is a lot of women, right, that are in this situation. So we're improving autophagy through the exercise, telomere length. And in fact, I'm going to link to the episode that I did with Nicolina Laut, where we went through all my biological age, because all of those are optimized through the exercise, the nutrition I'm doing. But the point that you're talking about here is really important, because when I do, and I know it is, obviously you're the expert, but I want people to understand, is when I haven't done a recent DEXA, but when I do like an in-body scan, this is coming up. I'm going to admit this is coming up for me, is that I'm very lean, I'm very strong, but I don't actually have as much muscle. So it sounds like I'm going to do this as an experiment. I can improve this. What it doesn't account for is when we're talking about digestion, this is the bit that I think women being so overloaded is how can we optimize that? You've mentioned glutamine, but if we're eating late, one thing that I found is actually just maybe focusing on protein and veggies, as in non-starchy veggies, can just help me get into that deep sleep better. So actually front loading more of those carbohydrates, and maybe that's the balance, because I've noticed my metrics improve. Would you say that for the woman who's listening to this and is just really busy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look at research that goes back for decades where you front load the day with more carb and then you start tapering off and having more protein and fiber towards the evening. That works with circadian rhythm, works with hormone pulses. It works with the way our body regulates our appetite hormones and our blood glucose. And yeah, I mean, we hear the old adage from our grandparents, breakfast like a king and dinner like a pauper. And it's the same idea, is you want to fuel during the day when your body needs it and can use it, and then start tapering down to have the reparation type foods that you want for sleep. And that's protein and really good fiber foods to help with your gut.
Yeah, which is the opposite to you hear on a lot of the bro podcasts, where they're talking about the fact that they fast and then they have this massive meal of protein and carbs at night, which is the opposite.
Exactly.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Oslo Sleep Buds. I'm so excited to partner with them because one of the most common questions I get from my community is how to get better, more restorative sleep. So many women struggle with perimenopause-related insomnia, where even the lightest noise like their partner's breathing bothers them, let alone the snoring, travel noise, their pet snuffling, or just that feeling of being exhausted even after 8 hours in bed. That's why I love Oslo Sleep Buds. These aren't just regular earbuds. What makes them a complete game changer is that they were created by former Bose engineers specifically for sleep. You can stream your own audiobooks, meditations, white noise, or their inbuilt audio. And here's the magic part. They have biometric sensors that detect when you've fallen asleep and automatically transition to gentle noise masking soundscapes so you stay asleep all night long. Here's something else I love. They're super soft and designed specifically for side sleepers. So many earbuds are uncomfortable when you're lying on your side. These are so comfortable, you'll forget you're wearing them. Plus, they use Bluetooth Low Energy, which emits significantly less EMF than standard Bluetooth. And if you prefer, you can use the Oslo Sleep Buds completely offline with downloaded sounds if you want to avoid any communication with your phone while you sleep. Oslo Sleep Buds give you complete flexibility for whichever setup feels best for you. They're incredibly simple to use. No complicated setup or routines. You just put them in, choose your favorite audio, and drift off. And the gentle in-ear alarm wakes you up without disturbing your partner. The reviews are amazing. Less tossing and turning, deeper sleep, and waking up feeling genuinely rested and restored. Whether you're dealing with a snoring partner, noisy neighbors, road noise, holiday travel, or perimenopause keeping you up at night, these create your own peaceful bubble. And because I want to support my listeners in getting the best sleep possible, I've arranged for you to get an exclusive discount. Head over to oslosleep.com/Angela and use code Angela for an exclusive discount. You'll also find the link and discount code in the show notes below. That's oslosleep.com/Angela and use code Angela at checkout for your special discount. Trust me, your future well-rested self will thank you. After 35, many of us start to notice the subtle stuff first. Workouts feel a touch harder to recover from. Sleep gets a little bit choppier. Brain fog can start to creep in. And that why is my midsection suddenly stubborn moment can show up. That's perimenopause doing its thing. Estrogen and progesterone begin to fluctuate, which can nudge muscle, bone density, and even cognitive sharpness in the wrong direction. It's not in your head, it's biology. Here's what's really going on. As hormones shift, we naturally lose muscle, between 3 to 8% per decade, which slows our metabolic rate. You may be doing all the right things, lifting weights, eating nutrient-dense food, but our cells get less efficient at making energy and recycling it. Think of your body's energy molecule ATP like a tiny rechargeable battery. When the charger is sluggish, everything feels harder. Training, focus, mood, and even staying resilient under stress. This is where creatine shines. Far from being a gym bro powder, it's an energy support system for your entire body. Creatine helps your cells recycle ATP faster, which means stronger lifts, sharper thinking, steadier moods, and better recovery. And here's something most women don't know. We naturally store 70 to 80% less creatine than men and tend to eat less creatine-rich food like red meat and seafood. That means that supplementation may be even more important for us. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 5 smart ways that creatine can help you feel stronger, sharper, and more resilient, even as hormones ebb and flow, even if you're a sleep-deprived mum trying to juggle your career and kids. A 2021 review in Nutrients by scientists including Dr. Abby Smith-Ryan and Dr. Darren Candow looked specifically at creatine supplementation in women across the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, perimenopause, and postmenopause. The conclusion? Creatine offers significant physical, hormonal, and cognitive benefits, especially for women in midlife and beyond. Creatine helps regulate cellular energy, supports muscle recovery, and fuels the brain. This is especially relevant during the second half of your cycle and times of hormonal disruption like perimenopause or menopause when energy and strength often take a hit. All right, so let's dive into the 5 scientifically proven ways that creatine can support your energy as a midlife woman. Reason number 1 is an energy booster. Most of us don't run out of willpower, we run out of energy. And creatine helps refill the tank so your day stops feeling like an uphill push. By topping up phosphocreatine, your cells recycle ATP faster. Think quick charge for movement and focus, which means more get up and go when you need it most. Workouts feel lighter, you'll find that extra rep without the eye roll. Between efforts, you recover, which means you can show up even when your schedule is full. It's calm energy, not that kind of buzzy, wired, but more vibrant and focused. And when showing up gets easier, the habit sticks. And that's really the doorway to everything else that you want. So with the lights back on, let's talk about what creatine does for your muscles next. When we talk about maximizing your potential, we have to talk about recovery, specifically your ability to quickly bounce back between sets in the gym. This is another place that creatine shines. A randomized controlled trial, which followed resistance-trained women, found that the creatine group didn't just feel better, they saw measurable results. When researchers had them perform major lifts, like squats and leg presses, the women on creatine achieved significantly more repetitions per set than those on the placebo. Think of it like this. Creatine is the battery charger for your muscle cells, allowing you to train harder, lift more volume, and ultimately get stronger faster. Second, and perhaps even more exciting, is the recovery element. Another study found that after a super intense workout, the creatine group experienced a significantly quicker return to full strength. You don't have to wait as long to be 100% ready for your next session. And here's the really exciting part for women. The women in that creatine group experienced a significant suppression of post-exercise edema. That's a really fancy way of saying that they had less of that uncomfortable muscle swelling and puffiness after a hard workout. So what does this all mean for your high performance life? Creatine accelerates the entire healing process. It speeds up the time it takes to regain maximal strength. It reduces that feeling of being swollen and beat up. You feel better, you're stronger, and you're ready to train again sooner. If you're enjoying this episode, I'd love to invite you into something that keeps the momentum going. Every Sunday, I send out Fresh Start, a short, uplifting newsletter that helps you level up your health, hormones, and performance for the week ahead. It's inspired by research from Katie Milkman, showing that fresh starts, like a birthday, a new month, or even the start of a new week, are powerful moments to build habits that last. That's why I created Fresh Start, to give you that opportunity to level up every single week. And inside you'll find simple science-backed tips that make it easy to take action without the overwhelm. Think of it as your Sunday ritual, a fresh start straight to your inbox. And it's completely free. Just click the link in the description and sign up so that next Sunday, your fresh start will be waiting for you. Okay, so getting back to the muscle building benefits. Number 2 is a muscle protector. As I mentioned, muscle mass declines by about 3 to 8% per decade starting in your 30s, and losses tend to really accelerate after 60. When combined with resistance training, women taking creatine consistently get stronger with better endurance and power. Creatine helps you do more work in sets 2 to 4 by regenerating ATP faster, so you can add reps, add load, or both. But it doesn't just help you get stronger and more powerful. It shortens recovery time between sets as you're generating ATP faster. And what that means is that you can often shorten your rest periods and still lift well. Perfect for the time-poor woman or busy mum like me. Muscle also burns calories while you sleep. It improves insulin sensitivity, so your body uses energy efficiently rather than storing it as fat. And muscle keeps you strong, mobile, and independent as you age, able to carry your own groceries, play with grandchildren, and live life on your terms. Alongside VO2 max, muscle mass and strength determine how fast you age. And research also shows that over time, creatine assists in a small but real decrease in body fat, especially if you're training. Women worry about bloating, but creatine draws water into the muscle cell, making muscles look fuller while supporting lean mass. And as I mentioned in the study above, the women in the creatine group experienced a significant suppression of post-exercise edema. Over time, research also shows a small but real decrease in body fat, especially when you're training. Number 3 is it's a brain booster. If you're in perimenopause or early menopause and you've met the infamous brain fog, losing your words mid-sentence, walking into a room and forgetting why, you're not alone. This is one of my favorite advantages of creatine. Creatine isn't a stimulant, it's a cell fuel. And in your brain, it helps recycle ATP, the tiny bursts of energy your neurons need for focus, memory, and mental stamina. On the days that test you, short sleep, back-to-back meetings, kids, life in general, creatine acts like a little power bank for your brain so that you can stay sharp. And a new meta-analysis found creatine can significantly improve your brain's processing speed. And that one study in particular found improvements of up to 51% in cognitive tasks, particularly in women. So why does this matter? Because as women in peri or menopause, cognitive fatigue, brain fog, and slower thinking are common and really frustrating. Here's the science in simple terms. Creatine helps regenerate ATP, the energy currency your brain uses to process information. More ATP equals faster, more efficient brain function. And the meta-analysis analyzed 16 randomized controlled trials. It found processing speed improved significantly. Attention and memory also got a boost. But what was really interesting was that the effects were most pronounced in women aged 18 to 60. As I mentioned earlier, women tend to eat less red meat and naturally store less creatine than men. And so that makes us potentially more responsive to supplementation. And the best part is you don't need months to feel the benefits. Improvements were seen in as little as 7 days with higher doses and about 2 to 4 weeks of consistent daily use. So if you start with 5 grams of creatine monohydrate per day, and for quicker results, you can also try a short-term loading phase of 20 grams per day for 5 to 7 days. The fourth reason is the bone guardian. Let's talk about the bone benefits. The dosage recommendation of creatine for bone is a bit higher than the standard 5 grams a day. A 2-year randomized controlled trial on creatine supplementation during exercise for postmenopausal bone health showed that when combined with exercise, creatine appears to preserve bone. The dose of 0.14 grams per kilo per day plus training improved hip strength indices while maintaining bone mineral density, with no kidney or liver issues reported. In postmenopausal women, a 12-month randomized controlled trial using 0.1 gram per kilo per day with resistance training preserved femoral neck bone mass density and even widened the femoral shaft. The changes are slow and modest, and the strongest data so far are postmenopause, but if bone is your focus, combine regular resistance training with about 8 to 12 grams of creatine per day. You can split that into 2 doses of 4 to 5 grams. And the final, fifth reason is it's a mood stabilizer. In a clinical trial with women who had major depression, those who took 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily alongside their antidepressant felt better faster and more than women on the antidepressant alone. And side effects were about the same. Why might that be? Well, creatine helps brain cells make and recycle ATP, so the circuits that handle mood have more steady energy to do their job. That translates it to it being an add-on that can help you feel steadier and more resilient under stress. While it's not a replacement for treatment, it can be a powerful tool to support your brain's energy needs and really help you function at your best. Let's talk about Spermidine. So you've mentioned, let's go a bit deeper into this and how it stimulates autophagy. You've mentioned there are some spermidine-rich foods. Leslie is a wealth of information, by the way. Anyway, you should go and check out her Instagram. We'll link to that in the show notes. And I see on there you've put things like mature cheese, shiitake mushrooms, but also taking concentrated forms. I think what I got excited about when I started taking the Spermidine is that the one that you formulated is a natural food source, which is the one that's proven by science, but also it's formulated in a way that it isn't just, which I'm just a big fan when scientists like yourself formulate this, is it doesn't just add Spermidine in, it also helps your gut microbiome produce more Spermidine.
Exactly.
Hopefully,
that was when looking at the formulation of it, I just thought this doesn't make sense to not use the body's own innate wisdom, right? We have this little pharmacy in our gut biome, but we've got to make sure that the pharmacy has input so it can actually manufacture these things. And so the input was fructooligosaccharides. So we put those in. to potentiate your gut biome's ability to manufacture your own spermidine. And then we have some supplemental food-derived spermidine as well. And that's from highly concentrated wheat germ, where we actually take out the polyunsaturated fatty acids, the omega-6 fatty acids that can go rancid. I know that there are different opinions on omega-6 fatty acids. I know you've had Kate Shanahan on and you've had somebody else on, and there are differing opinions, but honestly, the more this gets oxygenated, I've seen other brands of wheat germ derived spermidine, and they don't bother to remove the fatty acids. And if the capsule is clear, you can actually see it beginning to congeal in the capsule. And you just think, will those fatty acids actually become part of the outer layer, the outer membrane of the cell? Why would you want something rancid to be part of your cell? You know, if it's fresh, then that's okay. But if it's not, that is a problem. So that is our main formulation, but it's actually got a nice taste to it. So we've got a powder, and you can just sprinkle it on your yogurt, on top of an acai bowl, put it in a smoothie. You can, add it to your porridge, and it's easy then to incorporate into food, because I know a lot of people have problems with taking a lot of pills, right? Especially as we get older. And I know my mother, who's like 5'2", hates to swallow pills. So having a food, a food source as a powder is an option. We also do a gluten-free spermidine. So we have something called Primidine GF. And that was really formulated because so many other patients had heard about my story reversing my autoimmune conditions that they wanted to try spermidine, which has been shown to be anti-inflammatory. It reduces tumor necrosis factor alpha, it reduces cytokines. These are all problems that autoimmune patients have. And, but they couldn't take gluten, because that's such a big offender if you have an autoimmune condition. So went to Japan and found in Okinawa, found a strain of chlorella that actually has a high concentration of spermidine. And then I added in 2 other autophagy activators, also from Okinawa. And one is curcumin from turmeric, and another is nobiletin from Okinawan lime peel. It's a little bit like bergamot. You know how we use that in Earl Grey tea. Bergamot has some nobiletin in it too, but Okinawan lime has the highest concentration of any citrus. So we put all those together and then say, look, this is a food supplement. It is not a synthetic supplement. And we can also see in the lab that the food-derived spermidine outperforms, food-derived primidine specifically outperforms synthetic. And in some cases, the synthetic doesn't even activate autophagy at all. That's really important. Also, when we think about senescence of the immune cells. So the research done here at the University of Oxford by my scientific advisors was around rejuvenating immune cells that have already become senescent. For me, this is kind of the holy grail as an autoimmune patient. So somebody whose immune system went completely haywire, and I probably had a lot of senescent cells, the ability to reverse those, the senescence of those cells, and senescent cells are known as zombie cells. They just don't function properly anymore, but they don't die, which means that they're hanging around infecting all the other cells around them. The ability to rejuvenate immune cells is fantastic, because around age 63, Professor Katja Simon, an immunologist at the University of Oxford, and one of my advisors, says that most everyone begins to get these senescent immune cells. And if you have immune cells that don't function, you have less ability to fight pathogens, viruses, and pneumonia. That's why we always know if we have an elderly uncle who gets pneumonia, everybody says, "Oh, that's not good." Whereas if it's a 20-year-old, you think, well, that's not good, but they'll recover, right? So being able to reverse these senescent immune cells is a really, really big deal.
So when we're looking at exercise performance,
Mhm.
I think a lot of my audience will be aware, particularly if they're going through kind of their 40s, there's hormone changes, that they need to start resistance training, that they need, Stacy Sims has been on the show a few times. She's talked about the importance for women to do some of that top end work and that high intensity, which I think creatine can also help with.
Yeah.
What are the kind of performance benefits that we can see? And then we can look at dosages later.
Yeah, so across both biological sexes, it's pretty even, but let's focus on females. The first thing that you'll probably notice, the most robust evidence, is an improvement in muscle performance. So females get stronger, they have greater endurance and or muscle power. So that's huge applications for living functional independence later on in life. They also improve lean body mass. Now, lean body mass doesn't necessarily constitute muscle, but we think about 50% of lean body mass is muscle. So that is very favorable, obviously, when we talk about sarcopenia or getting older. But the one that a lot of females especially don't realize is that creatine has been shown to decrease body fat. I didn't make a mistake there. It actually decreases body fat. So to your first point, where some people experience water retention or the number going up on the scale, that's likely due to taking a little bit too much creatine in the initial stages, or creatine is osmotic. And what that means is it likes to take sodium and water with it. So typically in the first maybe 7 to 10 days, some people may experience a 1 or 2, 3 pound increase in body mass. But please be rest assured that's just water retention. Over time, creatine will increase lean mass, decrease fat mass, only by a small amount, but it is still a decrease. And therefore, you get better body composition parameters. So in summary, it improves muscle, body composition, and then we can obviously talk about the bone benefits primarily for biological females a little bit later on. And so it's not just for males, it's for everybody on the planet, essentially, yeah.
And when we're looking at that water that's kind of coming
Yes.
in, one of the things we can look at is we do something like an in-body scan or something like that. We can see that intracellular and extracellular water. I think women often struggle a little bit more with excess extracellular water in comparison to men. And what we want is that water in the cell. How can we improve that? And how does creatine affect that?
Yeah, so you're totally right. By increasing water retention extracellular or inside the cell, that causes unlocks the magic of creatine from a mechanistic perspective. So it's a myth to drink more water with creatine. It's not absolutely essential, but it is advised because hopefully you're taking creatine and exercising. So obviously that's a beneficial effect there. But one way to sort of offset the net water retention that some people don't like is I think a lot of people make an error in taking too much. So, for example, the loading phase is very common. It's 20 grams a day for about 5 to 7 days. That's typically only where we see this water retention or some adverse small effects. We recommend to take a lot lower dose and maybe divide that up into more frequent dosages throughout the day. So, for example, if someone says, I just want to start with 3 to 5 grams a day, that's totally great for muscle. I would advise you can take it all at once or divide that up into 2 smaller dosages in the morning and afternoon. And that really seems to decrease any of the chances of the adverse chance of water retention. But again, the idea with creatine is it likes to trap water, and that actually seems to be a signal to some of the benefits to the cell.
Right. Okay. Which actually, I mean, in terms of like when you're looking at aesthetics, that's actually going to improve the look, right? Particularly
100%.
with aging, because if you're filling out a little bit of water and you don't want like wrinkles and things like that, it's actually going to make you look better.
Yeah, and think of this as if we're putting more water in our muscle, which is primarily a muscle a water-loving tissue, the muscle will swell. And that turns on a whole bunch of beneficial signaling pathways and proteins and growth factor. You don't want your muscles to be dehydrated because of that decreases the metabolic efficiency. So when you're taking creatine and exercising, think of if you do experience a little bit of water retention, it's primarily inside the muscle, which is fantastic. And that's why bodybuilders can definitely take creatine before going on stage. They seem more vascular.
Okay, got you. And what about when we look at like high intensity in terms of how it's helping us get to that top end and recover faster in between sprints?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It helps recover in between sets and or sprints, as you would just allude to. And it also helps recover in between exercise training sessions. So, for example, if you were to do 3 sets of squat, it helps to recover ATP after every muscle contraction during each set. and in the rest period between each set. And that's typically why sets 2 and 3, when you're on creatine, you can do more work compared to placebo. So therefore, in each session, the individual can typically do more work. That's either lift more, do more reps, or whichever. And then it allows the muscle to recover quicker to get you back in the gym or on the track, whichever it is, more frequently. So that may allow an individual to train twice a day. That might allow them to train every day. So it really seems to be a recovery agent in addition to something what we call an anabolic agent.
Really interesting, because I would say that's something I have noticed. I've been able to really increase volume, both
Yes.
in terms of the number of sets,
Yep.
but also the amount of times I can train.
Right.
Yeah.
And another big thing is that people who are lifting heavy weight, they're usually advised to wait about 3 to 5 minutes between sets to fully recover your creatine stores. And a lot of people are time constraints. They don't have the luxury of waiting 3 to 5 minutes between sets. Creatine speeds up that recovery process, still allowing you to have benefits. So that may allow an individual who's very busy to get a really good workout in a shorter period of time and still get the benefits of that session.
I want to talk about walking, because I know you have a book coming out in January, Born to Walk. You've done a huge amount of research in this area. I personally feel, just from a mental health perspective, so many problems can be solved on a good walk. It's just creative thinking and ideas. What have you found are the main benefits to health from walking?
Well, the benefits are myriad. I mean, the human body, as a bipedal creature, we're literally designed to walk. We're designed to move. We're designed to be moving a lot and frequently throughout the day. We don't have 4 legs that allow us to stand in one place and not fall over. So just having, only 2 feet upon which to stand means we sort of have to move a lot to regain balance and to keep. But not just mood. Mood is elevated by walking, but the lymphatic system requires movement in that regard. Slow, easy, non-ballistic movement to optimize the lymphatic system, to clear toxins. Digestion really improves with low-level aerobic activity, much of which can be found in the form of walking. The book, Born to Walk, arose from my recognition that this running boom of the last 50 years has been a disaster. It's been wholly inappropriate for all but 2% of the population. Most people should not be running, at least as their primary focus in terms of a health or a longevity strategy. In fact, it's in many cases antithetical to health and longevity for overweight people or ill-adapted people to be running. One of the problems is that the shoe industry has created this marketing hype around running, around it being this be-all and end-all of exercise protocols, that it being the best thing you can do for your body. It's not. But the fact that the industry continues to create thicker and thicker, more cushioned shoes, which enable people who are ill-adapted to running to go out and run more miles because they can't feel the immediate trauma of the impact to their feet. Like if these same people were running barefoot, they'd give up after 20 feet with their heel striking and their poor form. So where am I going with this? I think that one of the things with the book Born to Walk is I'm giving runners permission to walk again. I'm telling people that if your strategy, if your goal is to be healthy and happy and have a longer life, to be more energetic, to have more muscle mass, and to lose weight, a better strategy is to do a lot of walking, orchestrate your diet around achieving metabolic flexibility, so you burn more fat, whether you're sitting at your desk or walking or even running, lifting some weights to build muscle mass, and yes, sprinting once in a while. And sprinting doesn't always mean running. It just means getting your heart rate to a high level for 20 seconds a couple of times in a workout once a week. But Born to Walk, it goes back. We retrace the running boom as having been like inappropriate. Like like most people in the 70s who ran, they ran because they were runners. They self-selected to be runners. Like, until you read the books on jogging and the book Born to Run, which was later on, you would never choose to go jogging if you were an overweight person. It's like, why would I do that? It hurts. It's no fun. It's like, why would I even choose to jog? And plus the shoes were thin shoes. So everybody who ran in the 70s was a runner. They were self-selected to be a runner. And then it wasn't
until... You see that in schools, right? From when they're a very young age, people self-select. There are some kids, very few of them, who just love running and they're just really, really good at it. But the vast majority are like, I don't want to do cross country. I don't like
No. That's a great example. There are people who love running and should run. I was one. I was a runner. I loved running. It was an amazing life for me. I was one of the best marathon runners in the country. And I will tell you that I have not run a mile in 30 years. Because once I got past that and I realized that it was tearing me apart, running is catabolic. Running tears down muscle tissue. Now, if you do it once a week as part of a broad-based strategy of lots of walking, a little bit of sprinting, some weightlifting, some organized classes or whatever, and then once a week you run 5 or 6 miles, great. That's a perfect application, because humans were born to walk. We were not born to run metronomically at 8 or 9 minute miles day in and day out. We were born to walk. We were born to be able to run once in a while as a result of the rest of the things we do in our life. But to do this day in and day out is it cannibalizes muscle tissue. It is usually done at a pace that is way too stressful for the average person. So most people who run are, they have to prepare for it and gird up to go out and struggle and suffer for 35 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever they're running. They get back to the house, they're exhausted. They've burned through a lot of glycogen. They haven't really burned that much fat. Yes, so they burn a lot of calories, but it doesn't matter, because when you burn glycogen calories, the stored sugar in your muscles, all that does is signal your brain, I got to eat more. I got to eat more tonight to prepare for if I have to go run tomorrow. If you walk, you burn 100% fat, right? And depending on how fast you walk, there's a point at which you can walk, up a hill on a treadmill or with a backpack or a weight vest on, where you can have your heart rate maxed out. So you can walk at a very high rate of output if you want. What we talk about in the book is where's that sweet spot where runners who are not getting the results they want from their running program, in other words, they have the same 15 or 25 pounds to lose after having been a runner for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and they're frustrated and they get injured because they're doing this activity with bad form. Where's the point at which they could walk mostly and burn mostly fat and not tap into those glycogen stores, and then be able to go to the gym and lift weights and tone their bodies up and achieve better strength and power and muscle mass, and then sprint once in a week. And the sprinting is really what cuts you up. So you have, one hand, you have the low level activity, which is zone 1 or zone 2 is what they call it these days. And then you have the high level activity, the sprinting, which is zone 5. And when you do enough of those, then let's say you still want to run. I'm like, go ahead and run with good form, run with minimalist shoes. And when your form breaks down, walk. And if your form breaks down after 3 minutes, walk. And then once you've recovered from that and you say, I feel like running again, run 100, 200 steps, 300, but only run with good form. That's the way you should develop into a runner. Now, if you're a self-selected ectomorph who enjoys pain, who has a high VO2 max, go for it. But the only people who really benefit from a serious running program are competitive runners. Everyone else would be so much better served cutting it, taking a step back and going, okay, I'm going to walk more. I'm going to sprint once in a while. I'm going to lift weights. And I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to get injured, because nobody gets injured walking. Pretty much nobody gets injured walking. Running, 50% of all runners are injured every year. And at any one point in time, right now, 25% of all people who call themselves runners are injured. That's a horrible statistic.
It's horrible.
And a lot of it is due to the shoes, to the footwear. The footwear is encouraging bad form because it's got this thick, cushiony, padded bottom, this sole with a raised heel that makes you think like you're running on clouds or on air, when in fact all it's doing is imparting all of the micro trauma up the kinetic chain to the ankles or the knees or the hips or the lower back. And so people get injured as a result of this. I think this book is going to really change the way people look at running. It's going to give people permission to walk and just say, you know what? I tried the running. It didn't work for me. Now I'm on a path to improved health, longevity, general well-being, overall fitness.
Do you know, it'd be great if, and I think you're right. I think it will do that. I've tested it both ways. And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because during COVID, I got myself a running coach and I was like, oh, I feel like I should do this running thing. And I'm naturally very lean. I lift a few times a week. I do the sprinting that you talk about. And I also walk a ton. And that keeps my body composition, my insulin sensitivity, everything in check. I don't have any of the belly fat that a woman of my age is meant to be getting. And so it works super well. I did this running period for only 3 months. I was never in so much pain. My body composition changed. I was now accumulating fat around my abdomen. And it was just awful, right? This was 3-4 years ago. So I absolutely agree with you. I think the difficulty, isn't it, is persuading people out of it. And many people, as you say, it's not that they even enjoy the run, but when they come back, they like the endorphins that they've got from being out.
Exactly. People say, I love running. I'm like, you don't love running. You love having run and you love calling yourself a runner. But
True.
while you're running, tell me that you are smiling and enjoying the whole thing. And people say, well, I love to put on the headphones and I like to go to, I'm like, okay, that's proof that you don't love running. If you loved running that much, you would not wear headphones. You would be out enjoying all of the inputs, all of the sensations, all of the little breathing patterns, noticing your gait and your stride, making corrections in it. So the fact that you have to wear headphones and listen to banger music while you're running is one of the first indications that you don't really love it that much. It's an escape for you. And I don't mind people having an escape. I mean, look, everybody needs their escape, but it's not a positive, necessarily a positive sort of form of escape or meditation. Now, the fact that your body composition changed, Angela, is really critical and indicative of what happened. So now you went from a kinder, gentler, walking-based routine with a little bit of sprints and some weightlifting thrown in. You have ideal body composition. Now you go to focusing on running. Your body, because you're running at a pace that's higher than you should be working out on a regular daily basis, your body's in stress. And it produces a stress hormone, cortisol. I know you know a lot about cortisol. Cortisol, as a short-term stressor, is very important to the body. We need it, but as a chronic production, overproduction of cortisol as a result of running day in and day out, it prompts the body to store body fat, and cortisol is that catabolic hormone. Cortisol tears down muscle tissue, and it does so because the brain says we're running faster than we should. We haven't learned how to burn fat at a high heart rate, at a high running pace. So now we're just burning sugar every time we go out the door and run. And because we're burning sugar and we're running out of this stored sugar in our muscles, the brain tells the adrenals to secrete cortisol to go to the muscles, to tear down the muscles, to strip the muscles of a few amino acids it can send to the liver to make glucose, to make more sugar so you can continue your run. And that's the reason every elite marathoner is skinny. None of them, even though they go to the gym and they might lift weights and they might have a heavy leg day and they can't keep muscle on because their bodies will not allow it to happen because running is catabolic. Walking is at the very least anti-catabolic and maybe anabolic in some cases.